How you guys doing? Oh, actually, I shouldn't be here, right? Is my mic on? Are we good? All right, if not, I can project. I'm a projector. Thank you very much. That was really nice for you to say. And I did not know that. So first off, I'm excited to be here. Just general, this is kind of off script. I was super excited that you guys have done this, continue to do this. This is important. I'm a native Brooklyn kid who's had good fortune and being able to be in communities where I'm encouraged to build and to explore and to learn. In fact, I just took my wife back to my Montessori school, grade school, to thank my teachers who helped to support that sort of lifelong learning muscle in me. So, big believer. So, you've already said that I'm Ron Williams. I will skip to the part where I say I'm going to talk about sad puppies today, and using this as a lens to talk about innovation through perspective taking. So, there's a true story. A couple of weeks ago, I was coming home early. I was thinking about what I was going to talk about here. We can flip to the next slide. This is the only slide. I'm going to keep that up the whole time, the entire time. I'm not joking. So I was coming home a little bit early, and we've got a puppy at home. And as I come in, this guy he's really cute. This is our real puppy. I realize that he is following me around the house, right? He's upset about something. And puppies, not unlike people, not unlike your direct reports, your managing directors, maybe the shareholders, get sad for all kinds of reasons, right? And I feel like it's my duty. Who here has a dog? Show of hands really quickly. Right, dog, puppy, cat, I'll forgive you, just be honest. Okay, there we go, right? So it's our job to kind of figure out, puzzle out why they're sad, right? That's kind of your job. I think it's the same with small kids. I'll tell you when we have a kid in October, but I think it's my job to puzzle out why he's sad. And so a funny thing happened. So I get home, he is following me from room to room. I'm trying to think about work and talks and clients. And I go through my checklist. I go through the funnel of making Biscuit not be sad, right? Sort of optimized funnel. Has he been fed? Has he been walked? The dog walker left a note. He's been fed. He's been walked. Where's toys? Your toy's right there. Throw his toy. He doesn't move. He's sitting in the same spot. And like any mediocre parent, I abandon him and go for a run, right? So I'm a terrible, terrible puppy parent. So I go on this run. I come back. And when I get back, he's still whining. And, you know, this is him right before we got him last year. He's a rescue. He's tiny. He's really cute. He's not always this sad, but he was still this sad this day. And so I can't figure it out. So I get down the stretch in our living room, and lo and behold, as I got my head close to the floor, here's his favorite toy stuck under our liquor cabinet. Couldn't see it, right? Couldn't see the ball. I needed to have my face a little closer to the ground. I needed to be taking it from his perspective. I should have been listening to his signals, which are different because it's a new apartment than his old signals. I needed a fresh perspective. I couldn't see the ball. So this is a very obvious visual metaphor that I'm using here, right? Not super subtle. What is the ball? The ball is that next big thing. The ball is that breakout investment in platform technology. The ball is that next product. The ball is that new business process, sales tactic, and it's happening everywhere. So who are the puppies? Well, the puppies are all of us, and hopefully we're not all sad puppies, but it's folks day-to-day living their lives, seeing different things in the business, experiencing a different view of the business than you or I might be. They're seeing things that we might not be, and that's the whole sort of point. How do we make sure that the stuff that they're seeing, we're seeing? Because there's no better way to make a puppy sad than to not give that puppy voice, not make them feel validated that what they're seeing, that what they want you to look at and find is worth talking about and bubbling up. So that's kind of the point of this talk, right, is to sort of see the ball, and Emma said it, or the sort of hashtags that were, if you're going to tweet and say bad things about me, you do with those hashtags so I can find you later. So how do we do this from a practical perspective? So we think there are kind of three elements that we take to clients, right? There's this idea, we call it the 3 C's. So there's communication, there's competency, and there's culture. So communication, I've already kind of alluded to, right? I wasn't checking for his signals the right way. And they changed because we were in a new environment. And guess what? The signals are always changing. The proverbial ball is moving to different spots, right? So how do we open up lines of communication in a siloed organization? Horizontally, up and down, apolitically. How do we do that? Big question. Second one is competency, this particular kind of competency. Investigation. How do we get good and help our teams get good at exploring what's worth exploring and figuring out what's worth putting more time into? So spending a little bit of time to figure out what's worth putting more time into. And the last thing is culture. And I've got loads of stories we can talk about after we've had a couple of drinks, so I know that you won't remember it. But I've been in environments where you were told that they want innovation, but then there's not actually a sort of rigor around compensating and or a culture of acceptance around taking risk to experiment, right? So it's not enough to say, well, we're going to talk about this stuff. We want to hear your ideas. And we want to teach the skills, but we're not going to sort of actually make sure it's tied to that bonus at end of year or whatever else that might be the case. So those are the 3 C's. How many of you guys have heard of lean startup? Show of hands, right? So this is for the rest of you guys, it's this book that was written in this kind of methodology by a guy named Eric Ries, Silicon Valley guy. And it was this profound sort of bubbling up. He didn't invent it. Actually, a guy named Steve Blank was his mentor, but he wrote this book. And the idea was pretty profound, that instead of raising a bunch of money, which still happens before you've built anything, or fighting for a budget in a corporate environment, building something and then seeing whether or not there's actual demand for it. Crazy idea. Why don't we see if we can find empirical evidence by testing into experimenting around what might actually have what they call product market fit, what might actually be something the market wants. So this is this big idea in startup world, but now it's become this conversation around enterprise, the lean enterprise. Why? Well, because increasingly, all these businesses that 10 years ago weren't your competitors are your competitors, right? When Jamie Dimon gets on the mic, proverbially, I don't think he was actually rapping, but it was a shareholders call, I think a letter of shareholders, and talks about peer-to-peer lending, right, as the kind of business that's originating $1 billion of loans and more a quarter, and says we've got to think about this space. The game has changed. Innovation is not just a buzzword. The speed at which you learn as an organization is going to come to be your competitive advantage. The speed at which you leverage all the different puppies in the crowd that can see the ball, that's going to be that leverage that you have, right? So when we think about this from the perspective of what's at stake, what's really at stake, I love alliteration. So there are 3 more letters, 3 R's. Revenue's an obvious one. If you don't build the stuff that some of your team is telling you or some of the folks in this room, if you're not making yourself heard, you'll miss revenue, and that sucks. I think the people in here like revenue. I think we all like revenue, right? But there's another issue. There's a relevance issue. So I'm 38. I remember when you build stuff like 4 years, 5 years after it was first argued about, 2 years after it was scoped, right? First sort of given budget. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Am I alone here, right? And like 5 years later, you're like, yes, we've launched it. And it's somehow still buggy and somehow doesn't still quite do the job. Well, today, if you do that today, if you guys are working on something that was scoped when George W. Bush was in office, we have a problem. Because the fact is that it is probably no longer relevant to how the market has moved, how the tools and solutions that are in the market have come to bear. And that's a bigger issue around optics, around how your team perceives you, how the market perceives you, which relates to this third part, which is really what this is about, which is people, recruitment and retention, right? So what's the best way, I said it earlier, I alluded to it, to get rid of a person is to not listen to them. Like, he was ready to pack his bags up when I wouldn't give him his ball. He was just going to take his little hobo sack with a little handkerchief and walk out the door. If you take folks who are smart and have good ideas, and you don't find a way to actually get them talking cross organization, cross business unit, you run the risk of actually ultimately pushing them out the door and letting folks know that it's not a space in which smart puppies can come and sort of get their ideas and the balls they seen, talked about, bubbled up, prioritized. So here's the good news. If you do it right, if it's done right, all the good ideas usually, or most of the good ideas, are already in the building. There's a room full of really sharp people. I can tell that there's a room of really smart folks who have ideas, 1 idea, 2 ideas, 10 ideas. There are probably hundreds of ideas in this room, many of which will not see the light of day. Some probably shouldn't. Some will, but they may not be here at Morgan Stanley. They may be elsewhere. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing, I don't know. But the trick then is this. If that, in fact, and I made the statement before that this is going to be the competitive advantage, if that's going to be the thing that defines how organizations, how enterprises continue to be really successful, shortening the cycle from a thing we think to a thing we know to a thing we monetize, right? Kind of launch to learn virtuous cycle. Well, then we better figure out how to empower folks to do this organizationally. And there's this kind of concept of associative fluency, which I really like, and we see it sort of in science all the time. It's taking one discipline or skills from one discipline and applying it over here in another place in the organization. And I understand that in the bank, I was an investment banker a very long time ago. Chinese walls exist for a reason. There are certain things that have legal or business implications. Businesses can't move if they're successful at the pace that startups can. But we can break down and create space in really, really targeted ways. It might not be Google's 10%, but it might be a hack day. It might be a test-to-learn budget that has sort of been institutionalized where people are competing for budget to experiment on new things. But we have to systematically and systemically encourage this sort of cognitive collision, right? So last 2 points are this. There are real muscles that we have to work here. One has to do with the data, one has to do with this sort of experimentation or kind of prototyping, which sounds like a bad word, I think, sometimes. in big environments. Data, has anybody ever heard somebody say, oh, we're data-driven, right? We hear this all the time. Everybody's data-driven. What they typically mean is they're really good at optimizing a funnel that they know well. So let's go back to my puppy example. I said that I went through my checklist, right? I knew what to do, and I was optimized for doing the same thing I always do, faster. So when they say that they're data-driven, what they really mean is they're really good at getting through the same assumptions that they always investigate faster. Well, that's how you get stuck in status quo, right? So we have to sometimes take a look and say, well, what points of data, what pieces of data can we utilize to be data as direction? What is an anomaly? You used the word anomaly, which I thought was great. What is an anomaly? And I also use culture. I really feel like I cribbed some of the talk, actually, because you were like culture and anomaly. And I was like, oh, those are my words. But anomaly, and I'll give you a quick concrete example. I built this company called Snapgoods, and we were doing Airbnb for stuff, kind of portable, expensive, durable gadgets, cameras, equipment, camping gear. And we realized that there was this one particular behavior and system that was really fascinating. We made it simple for people to say, hey, I'm going to San Francisco, I need a camera for 3 days, bring it to me at the airport, I'll give you $100, whatever. We realized that people were posting these links, these want ads, in social channels and hoping that the right friends or strangers saw them. The person who lives in San Francisco and is a photographer and is willing to respond. And I said, wait a minute, and I sort of was stuck with it, I was stuck on a loop for a couple of weeks, and I said, well, why don't we make it easy to do push-button segmentation, cut up my networks and show me only the people across Twitter, Facebook, my address book, and everywhere, connected to my friends, who talk about photography, know about photography, live in San Francisco. So we built that. Now, if we'd been optimizing our funnel for just the funnel that we thought we had, we wouldn't have seen that, right? So concrete example. Last thing, experimentation, prototyping. Not a bad word. It doesn't mean building a crappy product. It doesn't mean doing a half expletive job, right? It means doing a little bit to save yourself a lot so you can do a lot more, right? And so I wish that these were sort of skills that I'd had back in the day. I was at a children's publishing company. I'll talk more about this after, but had this great opportunity to reformulate this one business. Out of the 15 P&Ls, 65 cents on the dollar was fixed cost. How do we feel about fixed cost, right? Fixed cost is the worst. And so what I realized was, wow, there's this one assumption that we haven't investigated. And I wanted to investigate it. Entire senior management loved it except for one person. That person happened to be the CEO. I walked in with a good deck. I walked in with social capital. But I had no proof for this person. I had no ability to say to him, I ran a really cheap experiment to validate this assumption. And so we got shut down. And so if I can leave you with one idea, it's this idea that seeing the ball isn't about any one person. It's about facilitating an environment in which folks feel free to experiment, communicate, and actually support fresh perspectives so that the organization as a whole can move forward faster.